Che Guevara, a ruthless revolutionary, is intent on destroying the United States.
Che Guevara was a cold-blooded assassin. He had an unbelievable desire of killing people.
In the 60s, he's causing mayhem in Bolivia to spark off revolutions throughout South America that will destabilize the area and threaten American interests. He has to be stopped. So the CIA turns to top agent Felix Rodriguez.
I think it was very personal for Felix. He saw a lot of his friends die.
His mission: capture Che Guevara and bring him back alive. Now, based on recently declassified documents, we can reveal the true story of the secret CIA assignment to hunt down one of the world's most famous revolutionaries. In a remote area of the southern part of Bolivia, a unit of government soldiers are out on a routine patrol. Suddenly, out of the blue, seven are killed. 12 soldiers are taken prisoner. The Bolivian soldiers are losing an ever-widening war against one of the world's most notorious revolutionaries, Che Guevara, who is determined to spread chaos. Che knows the current Vietnam War is tearing the U.S. apart. His aim is to create similar confrontations throughout South America to drag them into it. This, he believes, will allow communism to finally triumph.
He wanted to create 100 Vietnams for the United States so that the United States would be putting out fires. He knew that the American public had no appetite to send troops all over the world. So that was his ultimate goal, bringing down America, which he believed was this imperial threat. He hated America.
In 1961, Che wrote, "The U.S. is the great enemy of mankind. Against those hyenas, there is no option but extermination. We will bring the war to the imperialist enemy's very home, to his places of work and recreation. The imperialist enemy must feel like a hunted animal wherever he moves. Thus, we'll destroy him." Born in Argentina, Che is a professional revolutionary communist.
He was this mysterious figure. I wouldn't say to the extent of Osama bin Laden, because there were differences. But really, the goals were the same, to bring down the United States.
He fights against the U.S.-sponsored coup in Guatemala. He leads the Cuban Revolution with Fidel Castro and overthrows the U.S.-backed government.
If you were going to be a revolutionary, you had to be a hard person. You had to be dedicated. You had to believe in what you were doing, and he truly did.
To students and revolutionary youths the world over, he is a hero, a freedom fighter.
He was young, he was handsome, he was articulate. He had this reputation. He's writing how-to books on revolution that are being used by revolutionaries all over the world and being read on college campuses in the United States. He was the picture of revolution.
But to others, Che is a cold-blooded killer.
When we think of Che, we think of him in the beret with the limpid eyes. But the real Che Guevara was a gangster, murderer, killer.
And now, in 1967, Che's brought his armed revolution to Bolivia.
His successes early on terrified the Bolivians because they didn't have the military to combat it. All their equipment was old World War II surplus stuff. They were in desperate need of some modern equipment, but mostly they were in desperate need of some modern training.
Desperate for assistance, the Bolivian president reaches out to the U.S. The CIA, monitoring developments closely, is concerned that if Che's revolution in Bolivia is successful, communism could sweep through huge countries like Brazil and Argentina.
Bolivia borders 5 other South American nations, and from Bolivia, that could be the epicenter of a revolution that would spread from Bolivia all throughout South America and Central America.
If this happens, it will bring communism right into America's backyard. At first, the American response is cautious.
Clearly, they need help. But we didn't want American soldiers going into the field and dying, because we're already engaged in Vietnam, and we did not want that to escalate into South America, into our hemisphere.
Just 17 Green Berets are flown in. Their mission is simply train the Bolivian soldiers. They are forbidden to fight against Che's guerrillas directly through fear of inflaming the situation. Che was right. America really didn't want to be sucked into another big conflict.
It was a classic Green Beret mission, which is send, special forces into an area, train the locals, get them really up to speed militarily, train them in the intricacies of war and counterinsurgency, and let them do the fighting.
For the next 4 months, the U.S. instructors, many veterans of Korea and Vietnam, train the Bolivian soldiers.
The military has a term for training. It's crawl, walk, and run. And when Green Berets got to Bolivia, the Bolivian army was crawling.
They teach them how to march, shoot, move at night, detect booby traps, fight hand-to-hand, and avoid ambushes.
Building aggression and building them into soldiers was a key part of the training. So I think you had to start the training by building that aggression and that fervor to fight the enemy.
The problem facing Washington is not only are the Bolivian army poorly trained, but intelligence on the ground is virtually non-existent.
Our intelligence network at that time wasn't great. We were so focused on the Soviet Union, we had very little intelligence on them. There was so much conflicting information, and that built into the whole myth of Che, this boogeyman. And did he have hundreds of men, thousands of men?
So, the CIA calls in one of their top agents, Felix Rodriguez, to lead the hunt for Che. 26-year-old Felix is the perfect man for the job. Rodriguez was a victim of Castro and Che's revolution in Cuba. He and his family were forced to flee when the communists seized power in 1959.
My uncle, who was a senator in Cuba, so he had to leave the same day to the United States in his boat. And of course, they ransacked his house. And then when I started looking at what was happening in my country, that's really what decided me to do something about it.
Felix left school to fight against Castro. He felt a motivation to go and do this. It was very important to him, and he's been fighting communism ever since.
I think it was very personal for Felix. He saw a lot of his friends die. He saw a lot of their businesses confiscated. He saw a lot of good people hurt.
The young Rodriguez develops a deep loathing for Che Guevara.
Really, he was a cold-blooded assassin. He had an unbelievable desire of killing people. He always hated the United States tremendously.
In 1967, Che wrote an address from his Bolivian jungle camp expressing that hatred. A people without hate cannot triumph over a brutal enemy. Our every action is a battle cry against imperialism and a battle hymn for the people's unity against the great enemy of mankind, the United States of America. Rodriguez is summoned to a meeting with the CIA in his hometown, Miami. He is told that his mission is to gather intelligence on the rebel force and help the Bolivians track Che down. One thing is made very clear to him. His job is to bring Che Guevara back alive.
For Felix, the thought of going down there and possibly capturing Che, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. It was his chance to give back to the United States and to right what he felt was a wrong to his country.
Rodriguez goes to Washington and moves into a safe house to prepare for the top secret mission.
It's standard operating procedure for the CIA to use safe houses in Washington. And the reason for that, obviously, was they didn't want people knowing about his mission.
Rodriguez is then given what little intelligence the CIA has on Che. Some personal documents and photographs found in Che's abandoned Bolivian camp, and statements from captured guerrillas and deserters of the rebel force.
It is very important to be able to familiarize yourself with as much as you can with the guerrilla. You want to know exactly how they feel, the way they operate, and that's important when something happens in the field.
As the days go by, Rodriguez slowly builds a picture of the rebel force. He learns that there are approximately 40 to 60 guerrillas operating in a 75-mile-wide corridor, stretching for over 200 miles in a remote wilderness area in southeastern Bolivia. They are well-trained, confident rebel soldiers. Despite the Green Berets' training, the Bolivian soldiers are no match for the guerrillas.
The captured documents that they found were key because they were the first thread that Felix was able to then pull on to try to track the trail.
In the course of his preparation, Rodriguez starts to focus on one particular rebel, a man named Paco.
Paco was a Bolivian who thought he was going to Cuba to study. Instead, his uncle takes him to Che's camp and says, "You're not going to Cuba. You're fighting for the Bolivian Revolution." And he said, "What Bolivian Revolution?"
Felix identified him as one of his key targets because it was easy to figure out his motivation. And I think a lot of times intelligence officers are looking for the people who have a reason to talk. And I think Paco's reason to talk was pretty simple. He was an unhappy guerrilla.
Rodriguez now develops a plan. If he can find Paco, he can potentially turn him and gain information that would lead them to Che. Special Intelligence Agent Felix Rodriguez secretly enters Bolivia. His cover, a businessman named Felix Ramos. The hunt for Che Guevara is finally beginning. Che Guevara, the ruthless revolutionary, is intent on destroying the United States. He's causing mayhem in Bolivia to spark off revolutions throughout South America that will destabilize the area and bring communism into America's backyard. He has to be stopped. CIA intelligence agent Felix Rodriguez is on a mission to hunt him down. But the clock is ticking. From March through to July 1967, Che and his guerrillas strike the Bolivian soldiers at will with devastating effect.
They were overmatched by these Cubans who had really honed their craft not only on the Cuban Revolution, but also later in the Congo and some other places.
Two weeks after Rodriguez arrives in Bolivia, government soldiers make a spectacular discovery. It's a cave used by Che's guerrillas. It contains a treasure trove of information on the rebel force.
Felix was able to convince the Bolivians that it was a good thing to take evidence, not to burn it.
Back in his local CIA station in the Bolivian city of Santa Cruz, Rodriguez is presented with the guerrillas' documentation of their contacts in the country, deciphered radio messages from Cuba, and travel information with false names and photographs of the rebels. One of the documents taken from the guerrillas' cave is Che's passport. It reveals how he entered Bolivia, disguised as a middle-aged Uruguayan economist in November 1966. Rodriguez spends hours combing through every wallet, photograph, notebook, and scrap of paper recovered from the abandoned guerrilla cave.
Che was a prolific writer, so he loved to write, and he was very disciplined. He kept all of his details of the operation and all the contacts and all the notebooks in caves.
Every day, Che carefully records the events of his guerrilla campaign in his personal diary. His captured writings provide Rodriguez with a valuable insight on how and where Che's guerrillas operate, who his colleagues and collaborators are, and what Che's thinking. From a military point of view, we had 3 new battles with losses for the army, but none for us. The morale of the guerrilla movement is growing stronger, and if handled well, will certainly guarantee success.
Che chose Bolivia because it was a central part of South America. And what his hope was to start the revolution there and then be able to spread it out into the rest of South America.
They believed that if you have a small group of men who are really dedicated and they start the revolution in a rural area, they can recruit the peasants, and that would spread throughout the countryside and eventually make its way to the cities. And then they would take over.
Che's writings reveal plans to create a major uprising using the Bolivian peasants. But as he reads on, Rodriguez discovers Che's strategy isn't working. The locals are not joining them. The peasant base has not yet been developed, although through planned terror, we can neutralize some of them. Not one enlistment has been obtained. Rodriguez realizes that Che has wildly miscalculated. He has focused his operation in the wrong part of the country. Che should have chosen the area around Bolivia's capital city, La Paz.
There are really 2 Bolivias. There's the Bolivia that's really active around La Paz, and you have tin and copper mines, and you have unions that are there, and you have the university system and students. That would have been right for revolution. But Che, for some reason, he picked this area of Bolivia that was remote, that was scrubland. He picked an area where the peasants, the poor farmers, spoke a different language. They really didn't speak Spanish. And so when he came into the area, they were very suspicious of outsiders. People were just looking to eke out a living. They were just looking to survive. They had no idea what revolution was.
This is critical news for Rodriguez. He now realizes there is a weakness. Che's rebel force is not as large as originally suspected. Then Rodriguez's detective work uncovers another clue to Che's operational plans: the guerrillas' account books. They show that all the funds for Che's revolution passed through one person's hands in Bolivia's capital city, La Paz. The problem is, they have a photograph, but no name. Rodriguez realizes if he can track her down, he can cut Che off from all his funds and communication. But who is she?
The American
CIA Special Intelligence Agent Felix Rodriguez is on the hunt for the rebel terrorist Che Guevara and his ruthless band of guerrillas. U.S. Green Berets are training the Bolivian troops to support Rodriguez. But so far, he is no nearer to capturing Che. Then, a critical piece of intelligence comes through to Rodriguez's CIA station in Santa Cruz. In a remote area of the country, a local farmer reports that he's spoken to some guerrillas. They had turned up and asked him where they could safely wade across a swollen river to get some supplies.
The guerrillas had no support from the people because they attempted to contract with a farmer who was going to give them a safe way to cross the river. So they were using the locals to help, while the locals sold them out to the Bolivians.
The Bolivian army now set a trap. They tell the farmer to put a white curtain on a tree to let the guerrillas know where it is safe to cross. During the early hours of the morning, Bolivian soldiers stake out the area. From his base in Santa Cruz, Rodriguez urgently calls the Bolivian commander and tells him that it's vitally important that any prisoners taken are kept alive so he can interrogate them.
Felix understood that you don't get intelligence by killing people. You get intelligence by making them your friends and eliciting information from them, and he was very good at that.
The Bolivian soldiers wait all day for Che's guerrillas to show up. Then, as evening approaches, the guerrillas, guided by the farmer, begin to wade across the river at the agreed spot. As they reach midstream, the Bolivian soldiers open fire. Seven of Che's guerrillas are killed.
At the end of the battle, they were able to pull two survivors, two men who were wounded.
One is executed. The other is identified as Paco, the man Rodriguez believes could be the key to getting to Che. Rodriguez receives the news of Paco's capture. His worry is that the Bolivian soldiers will shoot him before he can interrogate him.
That's why I interceded and told him this prisoner was very important to us. If you believe that the information we got from him is not worthwhile, I will never ask you for another prisoner. But please give this guy to us. And he did.
Felix went to get him and flew him out and made this youngster realize that he was not going to be killed. And the relief must have been overwhelming because the other guerrillas were dead.
He was wounded in two places. Not lethal, but he was wounded in here and in this place here, in these two places here. So I did pay for a nurse from a hospital to come over and to treat him. And we were able to save his life.
Back in his base in Santa Cruz, Rodriguez can now begin the most important part of his mission. He can interrogate the person who he thinks could lead him to Che. At first, Rodriguez plays the nice guy.
He gives him clothes, he lets him, buys him magazines, he allows him to write letters home. And on the flip side, he starts building rapport with him just by talking to him.
Little by little, Rodriguez gets Paco to open up.
I could tell that the guy had a tremendous memory. He will cite the location where he was months before, and he could give you the address and the name of 15 people. And that's very unusual.
After 2 weeks of interrogation, Rodriguez realizes the great revolutionary Che is in even more trouble than he thought.
From Paco, he was able to find out that this was a very fractured unit. There was a lot of infighting. There was no harmony. This was a dysfunctional revolutionary band.
They didn't have enough food. They weren't able to scrounge from the people because the people weren't supporting them. What it did is it degraded his force to the point where they were really combat ineffective.
A lot of the Bolivians wanted to desert and go back to their families. The Cubans were hardcore, and they said, no, you're not going to desert. And the Cubans basically took over.
Thanks to Paco's information, Rodriguez now realizes that Che's guerrillas are on the point of collapse.
And he realized there weren't hundreds of soldiers out there. There was this small unit. They were a ragtag unit. And really, it wasn't whether we're going to beat them. It's we need to get Che.
Rodriguez then decides to show Paco the photograph of the mysterious person who controls Che's funding and communication network.
So I brought these pictures to Paco, and Paco was the one who identified Loyola Guzman and told us, this is La Coyola Guzman, who is from the university.
Loyola Guzman, 25, a graduate of the elite Communist Party activist training school in Moscow, a member of the Bolivian Communist Youth. She is Che's key contact and financial organizer, working out of a secret cell in Bolivia's capital city, La Paz. This is a huge breakthrough for Rodriguez. He calls in the Bolivian soldiers to arrest her, but she refuses to talk, saying she would rather kill herself than betray her comrades. Despite her silence, CIA agent Rodriguez has won a victory. By capturing Guzman, he has cut Che off from his funds and communication. Rodriguez has them exactly where he wants them. The rebel force is now completely isolated and on their own. CIA Special Intelligence Agent Felix Rodriguez is on a mission to hunt Che Guevara down. Che is causing mayhem in Bolivia to spark off revolutions throughout South America that will destabilize the area and threaten American interests. He has to be stopped, and the CIA is now closing in on him. They have killed a third of his men, captured one of his key guerrillas, and cut him off from his funding and communication. The guerrillas are completely isolated and alone. All the CIA need to do is initiate an operation to finally bring Che to his knees. But Rodriguez still doesn't know where Che is. Then, there's another breakthrough. Bolivian soldiers fire on a small band of guerrillas. 3 are killed.
The 3 men are brought in on the back of mules.
If Rodriguez can identify any of the dead men from his long study of this rebel force, he might have a clue to Che's whereabouts. Rodriguez finds a driving license and documents. The names he knows are bound to be false, but they do contain photographs. Back at his CIA office in Santa Cruz, Rodriguez compares these documents to the information he's collected in his files. He is able to identify the three guerrillas. One, called Miguel, is captain of Che's front column.
One thing that Felix was a good detective. He was a good investigator. So at this point in the campaign, he knew every member of Che's group. He knew how they moved.
Che divided his column into 3 sections, with groups of men traveling in the front, middle, and rear guard.
Che split his force into 3 that would march in certain intervals so that you would never caught all of them together.
Rodriguez knows that Che always moves in the protected middle column, just 3,000 feet behind his front men. Using the location of where Miguel is killed, Rodriguez is able to determine Che's position. This is the breakthrough he's been waiting for. It is the critical moment. He now knows where Che is. He's got to strike immediately. Rodriguez urgently calls the U.S. Green Berets Command to release the Bolivian 2nd Rangers Battalion from training and send them in to combat Che.
I said, we are convinced that Che Guevara is in the area.
At first, there was pushback. They said, they're still training. They haven't even had their graduation ceremonies yet. How are we going to send them out there?
I said, we have to move the battalion right now. We want to get him.
Rodriguez eventually gets his way. The Bolivian battalion are dispatched immediately to hunt Che down. Rodriguez receives information from the Bolivian command that there is a band of 17 guerrillas holed up in a ravine somewhere deep in the Bolivian countryside.
The area that they were working in was a very rough, mountainous area. It was not like dense jungle that an insurgent can hide very well in.
The Bolivian army starts to move in.
Che was really trapped in this valley. And by now, the Ranger Battalion was in the area hunting him down, using the techniques, the training they received from the Green Berets.
Che and his guerrillas discover they are now completely encircled by the Bolivian troops.
It is the key moment in the campaign. Tactically, it's perfect. It's exactly what they were trained to do, which is they set up a blocking position on the high ground, and then they sweep through the canyon, trying to flush Che out.
They continued pursuit, and that's what they did. They ran these guys into the ground, literally.
As the guerrillas try to escape, the soldiers, all recent graduates of the U.S. Army Special Forces training camp, pick them off. But there is one guerrilla who stands his ground against the Bolivian soldiers. CIA Special Intelligence Agent Felix Rodriguez and the U.S. Green Berets trained Bolivian soldiers have been hunting down the ruthless revolutionary Che Guevara in the remote South American countryside. Che's rebel force is now locked in a heated battle, and the tide is turning in favor of the Bolivian army. One guerrilla is putting up a fierce fight. A bullet strikes him in the leg, and he collapses on the rocks. As the soldiers ask him to identify himself, he shouts, "Don't shoot me. I am Che Guevara, and worth more to you alive than dead." The wounded Che is brought back to a small hamlet. He is kept under guard in a schoolhouse until the Bolivians decide what to do with him. The news reaches CIA agent Felix Rodriguez in his station in Santa Cruz.
When Che was captured, we heard the news. You know, it was a tremendous feeling.
Rodriguez now flies in to where Che is being held. The first thing he does is photograph all of Che's captured documents.
And that's important because when Che surrenders, he has this knapsack, and it has his diaries, because Che is a prolific writer, and every day he would sit down and write another diary entry telling all about the campaign. And Felix Rodriguez recognizes immediately just how important this is. He's going to start taking pictures of the diary for the CIA so they can process it.
These pages document in detail Che's 11-month military operation in Bolivia and his revolutionary thoughts. It will help to inform the CIA on how communist-backed guerrillas plan and cement their armed revolutions. But then, Rodriguez learns something alarming. The Bolivian officers holding Che are threatening to execute him. This is directly against Rodriguez's orders to keep him alive so the CIA can interrogate him.
Felix's mission there, though, is really to try to save Che's life, because the CIA at that point had told him before he left, we want this guy alive. If you can get Che alive, get him alive.
Rodriguez now appeals to the Bolivian military's top brass to halt the execution. The answer comes in a coded call, sealing Che's fate.
We had a very simple code: 500 Che Guevara, 600 dead, 700 alive.
Rodriguez is given the code 500 for Che, 600 for dead. Che is to be executed.
So at that point in time, I thought there's not much I can do anymore.
Rodriguez enters the schoolhouse to give Che the news. These two men have been playing a lethal game of cat and mouse. And now, the final confrontation.
Che would talk to no one. He would not be talked to, but he talked to Felix. And the question has always been why. And to me, the answer is that Felix treated him like a man.
I look at him and say, "Commander, I'm sorry. I tried my best." He perfectly understood what I was saying. He turned white like a piece of paper. But he said, "It's better this way, as you have never been captured alive." And then he changed the expression and said, "And if you can, tell my wife to remarry and try to be happy." That was the last word. We looked at each other, he approached me, we shook hands, and we embraced.
Rodriguez asks if he can take a picture of the two of them side by side. Che agrees.
I gave my camera to the pilot, and I stood next to him, and some soldiers next to us put my hand around him and said, "Commander, look at the little bird." And he laughed. It's a Cuban saying, "Mira el pajarito," when you tell that to kids, you know. Actually, when I gave the film to the CIA, I told them there's a picture of Che with me laughing. Of course, when he saw the picture was going to be taken, he changed the expression.
This is the last picture taken of Che alive. Now the moment has come to carry out the orders from the Bolivian High Command. Rodriguez briefs Che's executioner, a Bolivian soldier who's volunteered to shoot Guevara. Executing Che without a trial is illegal, So Rodriguez orders the soldier to make it look like he has died in battle.
Don't shoot from here up, shoot from here down, because this man's supposed to die from combat.
39-year-old Che Guevara then says his last words. I know you've come to kill me. Shoot, coward. You are only going to kill a man. So ends the life of one of the most famous revolutionaries of all time. The man who set out to overthrow U.S.-backed governments and destroy America lies dead.
Che Guevara was a charismatic, provocateur, revolutionary, gangster, murderer who's hugely unsuccessful in Bolivia. And I think he met the fate he deserved.
Che's body is flown to a local town where he is laid out for public display. It's a message to everyone. Revolutionary terrorism will not triumph. Back in Washington, the CIA views this as the perfect operation. They've been stalking Che for over 10 years and have now finally ended his reign of terror.
For the Americans, I think it was some relief. He had been a ghost for so long, they had tracked him for so long, and they knew that he was such at the heart of this exporting of the Cuban-style revolution. To be able to have him gone and not be able to start a revolution in there was I think, greeted well.
High on the list of CIA successes is the way Rodriguez broke new ground in Bolivia with his pioneering investigative techniques.
I think that his insistence on keeping Paco alive, I think the way he exploited intelligence, I think the way he elicited information, the way he dealt with the Bolivians on a one-to-one basis made it possible for them to do the capture that they did.
It was a blueprint for everything that's done right and continues to be done right to this day. A lot of the techniques are still being used, especially in Afghanistan.
6 weeks after Che's capture, Rodriguez was back in South America, training an elite Ecuadorian intelligence unit in the anti-terrorism techniques he had perfected in Bolivia. Argentina, El Salvador, and Lebanon followed. In 1969, the man who caught Che Guevara became an American citizen and enlisted in the United States Army. During the Vietnam War, he flew over 300 helicopter missions and was shot down 5 times. He received 9 crosses for gallantry by the South Vietnamese government, and during his career with the CIA, Rodriguez was awarded the Intelligence Star for actions of extraordinary heroism. But despite all this, Rodriguez will always be remembered for his CIA mission to hunt down Che.
You know, I was 26 years at the time, 26-year-old. I have done a lot of other things that I consider probably